Cowboy, you saved the youngest. Now by sacred law, you must marry all four sisters. Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like the video and tell us in the comments where you're watching from.
Heat pressed against the landscape as if the sun wanted to burn every living thing off the land. Dust moved in waves across the road, sticking to skin and clothing. Garrett Holt rode with his head down, hat pulled low, his shirt damp from sweat that had dried twice already today. He rode alone most days because that was easier. He owned a ranch not far from here, 60 acres of stubborn earth and fences that constantly needed repair. A couple hired hands came and went, but Garrett stayed. He had left too many people behind in his life. This ranch was supposed to be a place where he didn't fail anyone anymore. He came into this territory years ago after serving as a scout during the war. He saw how quickly a life could end. He buried friends. He made mistakes he didn't talk about. He tried to save people once and failed, and failure stuck to him like dust. He avoided towns unless he needed supplies. Fewer eyes, fewer questions. He expected another quiet evening of riding, checking the south boundary before heading home. Then he heard shouting. His horse slowed as Garrett listened. Voices raised in anger, a woman's cry, the sharp crack of a rifle. His shoulders tightened, breath held, instincts from the war gripping him again. He guided his horse forward until he reached the edge of a small ravine. Below, a wagon lay on its side, a wheel broken. Four young women were herded away from it by three armed men, wearing badges that didn't look official, not the kind carried by real lawmen. The women looked Mexican and Apache mixed. Long dark hair, bronze skin, faces full of warning and desperation. Their hands were bound, dresses torn. They tripped as they were forced toward horses. Garrett searched the ground, saw one more man dead near the wagon, a knife still in his hand. So the women had fought already. He saw fear in their eyes. He also saw rage. One of them stumbled. The youngest, maybe 18. Small, slight, terrified. Her shoulder was bare where cloth had been ripped off. She hit the ground hard and a horse reared above her, hooves flashing dangerously close to her skull. The girl froze, arms tight to her chest, as if bracing for the end. Garrett reacted before thinking. His rifle came up. His shot dropped the rider, threatening the girl. A bullet cracked the dirt near Garrett's boot, and he slid off his horse, taking cover behind a boulder, firing twice more, fast and clean. Another captor fell. The last two men fled, kicking dust into the air, choosing their lives over whatever plan they had for those women. Silence returned almost too quickly. Garrett stayed behind the rock a beat longer, scanning for movement, watching the women. All four were pressed close together, breaths fast, eyes wide. Grazes, bruises, dirt. The youngest still shaking. Garrett stood slowly with his hands away from his gun. "You're safe," he said, voice controlled, steady, serious. The oldest stepped forward. Her dark braid hung over one shoulder, partially covering the deep tear in her dress. She pulled the cloth up without showing embarrassment, only exhaustion and determination. She stood straight, like she refused to let danger break her dignity. "My name is Isabel," she said, her voice low but firm. "This is Serena, Marisol, and Alma." The other three watched Garrett, waiting for proof he was better than the last men who claimed authority over them. Garrett nodded once. "I'm Garrett Holt," he said, passing through. Serena clutched her arms tightly across her chest, dress torn from the front, breathing short like she might faint if she let herself relax even a little. Marisol stared at Garrett with suspicion sharp enough to cut through the air, as if expecting any man to take advantage the moment he saw four women alone. Alma, the youngest, didn't look away from Garrett, her fear shifting into something like hope. Isabel continued. "We were taken from our village this morning. They said we were purchased by a county judge in Arroyo Ford." Her jaw clenched. "They said we belong to him now." Garrett felt anger rise inside him, hot and familiar. He had seen this before during the war. Men turning law into chains. "No one belongs to a man like that," Garrett said. His voice stayed quiet, because quiet made the truth heavier. Serena's voice finally broke out, raw and shaking. If you leave us here, they'll come back. Garrett looked at the ground for a moment, thinking. He had things to do. He had cattle to check, fences to repair. Every hour mattered. The ranch needed him, and he preferred staying far from trouble. But turning away from this, turning away from 4 people who clearly had no one else, that would be a mistake he wouldn't be able to ride away from. We go to Red Mesa Crossing, he said. Town's close enough. Sheriff can help you. Isabel studied him again. And you? She asked. I'll see you there, Garrett replied. He didn't promise more than that. Couldn't, but it was enough for now. He cut their bindings carefully so they wouldn't flinch. He helped them mount the horses left behind, never letting his hands linger or his eyes stray where fabric had torn. Respect mattered more than comfort right now. The sisters didn't talk much as they rode, every one of them watching the land around them as if danger hid behind every rock. Garrett rode out front, rifle across his lap, constantly scanning the distance for returning riders. His heartbeat stayed high, not from the gunfight, but from responsibility. He had chosen this. He needed to finish it right. Behind him, Alma rode close, gripping the saddle horn like she was scared he might disappear if she let him move too far ahead. She looked at him like a drowning person looks at a rope thrown in the water. He didn't look back often, but he knew she was there. The sun lowered, shadows stretching long as they neared the town. Dust from their horses' steps rose behind them like a trail marking the start of something Garrett didn't ask for. He came to check fences. Now he was escorting 4 women who had lost everything. He didn't know yet that helping them would cost him far more than time. He didn't know yet that Red Mesa Crossing had its own rules. He didn't know yet that by saving them, he had changed the course of his life. All he knew was that he could not walk away. Not this time. Red Mesa Crossing appeared over a rise in the land, just as the sun dipped lower, turning every shadow long and dark. The town was small, a few buildings facing a dirt road, a saloon with a red lantern already lit for business, and a sheriff's office with bars on the single front window. The sisters rode closer together as they approached, each one tense because towns were rarely kind to women who looked different and had no man speaking for them. Garrett slowed his horse so they would feel less rushed, watching their eyes track every stranger they passed. Townsfolk stared back with suspicion and interest, some muttering under their breath. Garrett saw the way Alma shrank slightly in her saddle when a group of men stopped to watch them ride in, their eyes lingering too long on bare shoulders and exposed cleavage made by torn fabric the sisters couldn't fix yet. Serena bowed her head, pulling her hair forward to shield what the tear in her dress revealed. Marisol glared openly, ready to fight any hand that reached out. Isabel stayed strong in front, but tension marked her voice when she whispered to Garrett, "Do not leave us alone here." "I won't," Garrett answered, because walking away now would feel like dropping a match into a barn full of dry hay and pretending the fire wasn't his fault. He guided them toward the sheriff's office. The sheriff, a man named Calder, was already standing by the door, his belly stretching his vest buttons and a badge pinned crooked to his chest. His eyes first landed on Garrett, then on the sisters, and the interest that flashed across his face wasn't polite. Garrett dismounted and kept his voice calm. These women were taken by armed men near the dry riverbed. I stopped them. Sheriff Calder stepped closer, looking the women over with slow judgment rather than concern. "Where's the paperwork?" he asked. Garrett frowned. "Paperwork." Calder tapped the badge pinned onto his vest. "Those men you shot work for the judge in Arroyo Ford. He paid for these women fair and legal. They were promised in transaction. That makes them property until the judge signs release." "They're not livestock," Garrett said. He did not raise his voice, but the words came heavier now. Calder smirked like he had heard such objections many times. "Law disagrees. Since you intervened before delivery was complete, the law places responsibility on the man who interfered with the transaction." He pointed at Garrett. "Meaning you." Isabel stepped forward fist tight. "We do not belong to anyone," she said through clenched teeth. Calder shrugged, like her defiance meant nothing. "The judge will come claim what's his. Unless." Garrett did not like the pause. "Unless what?" he asked. "Unless you intend to take care of them yourself," Calder said. "And I don't mean for a night under a roof. The law requires marriage. all four, responsible for their food, shelter, protection. For life. The sisters froze like the ground had just dropped out from under them. Alma whispered, barely audible, "Marriage all of us to him?" Calder crossed his arms. "If you refuse, the judge will take them back, and trust me, he won't treat them gentle like you have. You want to fix what you broke? Here's your chance." Garrett felt pressure building behind his ribs, the same feeling he had the night he made a choice that cost a man his life and left a woman crying in the dirt. He left back then because he thought distance would stop the guilt. It never did. He looked at Isabel, who stared back proud, but afraid of what the wrong choice might bring. Serena's eyes were wet with panic she tried to hide. Marisol looked ready to attack the sheriff if Garrett didn't give the right answer fast. Alma gripped the saddle horn and watched Garrett like her entire future balanced on his next breath. The townsfolk gathering nearby waited too, expecting him to walk away, to say it wasn't his problem. Garrett looked back to the sheriff. "What happens if I say yes?" "You become their husband," Calder said plainly. "All four. And no lawman, judge, or town drunk can take them from you without your say-so." It was absurd. It was unfair. It was a lifetime of responsibility he never asked for. He could already hear the future problems for women with trauma, anger, fear, no home, no money, no trust in men. And himself, a man who barely trusted his own ability to protect anything. But he also saw the alternative. For women dragged back to the judge. Used, controlled, broken. Garrett swallowed. He took a slow breath. He lowered his hat to shade his eyes. "I'll take responsibility," he said. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The sisters stared at him, stunned. Garrett continued, voice steady. "They stay with me. All four of them. Under my protection." Calder blinked, surprised he expected a fight and didn't get one. He nodded once and spit into the dirt. "Then the law says you're married. I'll write the certificate myself." Isabel exhaled shakily, relief and fear at war inside her. Serena wiped her eyes quickly so no one would see tears. Marisol looked at Garrett like she wasn't sure whether to hate him or thank him. Alma stared at him with gratitude, so raw, almost hurt to look directly at her. People kept watching, whispering, judging. Garrett turned to the women. "We need to leave before word spreads," he said. "My ranch is quiet. You'll be safe there." The sisters nodded. They didn't have the strength to argue with hope. Garrett mounted his horse. The sisters followed. They rode out of town with the last of the sunlight pressing at their backs, while the sheriff watched with a smirk that held too much satisfaction. As the dark gathered over the land, Isabel moved her horse closer to Garrett. "You did not have to do this," she said, voice low. Garrett kept his eyes forward. "Yeah," he answered. "I did, because if he had walked away, he would have become the kind of man he was trying to stop being. Now he had 4 wives he barely knew, for lives depending on him not to fail again. A judge who would come looking, and a ranch built for one man, now holding 5. Tonight, they would reach his land. Tomorrow, everything would change." Night pressed over the land faster than Garrett expected. The last light slipped away by the time his ranch house came into view, a modest structure of wood and stone, a barn standing a short distance behind it, a corral gate still swinging from where he'd planned to fix it before he got dragged into all this. The air smelled like dry grass and old smoke, and the sisters looked at the property with the kind of fear that didn't vanish just because danger was farther away now. Garrett rode ahead and dismounted first. He moved slowly, giving them time to adjust, making sure they didn't feel rushed or trapped. He could tell none of them had been inside a stranger's home without fear before, and now they were walking into a life they hadn't chosen. He opened the door and stepped inside. The house smelled of stored beans, old wood, and the faint remains of coffee he'd made this morning. It wasn't much. One main room with a table, a small stove pushed near the wall, shelves that didn't hold enough, and a hallway leading to 2 small bedrooms. He slept in one. The other he had never finished fixing after the winter storms caused a leak in the ceiling. Now that second room would have to hold 4 shaken women who needed safety tonight more than comfort. Garrett lit a lantern. Warm light spread across the room. The sisters stepped inside hesitantly, Alma the slowest, eyes darting like she expected someone to jump from behind a wall. Isabel gently touched her back, guiding her further. Serena wrapped her arms across her chest to hold her torn dress together. Marisol looked everywhere at once, probably counting exits and windows, not trusting walls to protect them. Garrett saw all of it and didn't comment. He pulled a few extra blankets from a trunk and set them on the bed in the second room. "It's not finished," he said. "Roof still needs patching, but it's dry. It'll do for tonight." Serena asked quietly, "Where will you sleep?" "Barn," Garrett answered without hesitation. "You take the rooms. You need locked doors more than I do." He showed them the simple wooden latch they could close from the inside. Isabel checked it twice before she let go. Garrett wasn't blind. He knew some listeners might wonder why he didn't share the house with them, especially after being declared their husband. But he wasn't that kind of man. Not with women who were scared and bruised and unsure if any man deserved trust. He needed them to breathe without fear first. He went to the kitchen shelf, grabbed a sack of beans and tin cups. "You're hungry," he said, not making it a question. "I'll fix something quick." Marisol stepped forward. "We can cook," she said, voice firm but softer than before, maybe wanting to prove they weren't helpless. Garrett gave a small nod. "Stove's yours." It was awkward at first. Serena wasn't sure how to handle pans she'd never used. Isabel tried to occupy her nerves by organizing what little food he had. Alma stood close to the stove, warming her hands, silently glancing toward Garrett as if confirming he was still there, still choosing to help. Garrett chopped wood outside, giving them space, but he listened. The quiet clinking of dishes, the cautious footsteps, Alma's soft gasp when a spark jumped from the stovetop. They were trying to feel normal in a place that wasn't theirs yet. After dinner, they sat at the table, each of them silent because their minds were loud with thoughts they couldn't voice. Garrett rinsed plates outside while the sisters whispered softly in their language, discussing what kind of man he was. Isabel watched him through the window. She wasn't convinced yet, but she saw something she hadn't expected, a man who didn't demand anything in return for kindness. When he returned, he leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed. "Tomorrow, we'll ride into town to get clothing for you," he said. "New dresses, ones that fit and aren't torn." He looked specifically toward Alma and Serena, who were still trying to keep ripped fabric from slipping. Both women lowered their eyes, embarrassed and relieved at the same time. Garrett continued, "I have 2 horses that need feeding before I settle in the barn. If any of you like, you can help. Give your mind something to do." Marisol stood first. "I'll help," she said immediately, maybe needing to prove she wasn't afraid anymore. Isabel joined soon after. Serena hesitated, but followed because being left behind made her uneasy. Alma stayed in the doorway, watching. Garrett showed them how to toss feed into the trough and check water barrels. The barn was warm from animals breathing, and dust filled the air where a lantern light touched it. The sisters worked quietly, their bodies loosening from fear for the first time since the ambush. Alma stepped inside last, slow, almost childlike. When the barn door creaked behind her, she startled. Garrett kept his distance and spoke gently. "Nothing here can hurt you," he said. Her voice trembled. "I thought we were going to die today." Garrett tightened his grip on the lantern handle. He didn't look directly at her when he replied. "Not while I was there." Alma swallowed hard, emotions tightening her throat. "You chose to help us." "Why?" Garrett didn't offer hero tales. He didn't pretend nobility. He just answered truthfully. "I've seen what happens when no one steps up. I won't let that happen again." Isabel overheard. She didn't reply, but something in her expression shifted. Not trust, not yet, but respect beginning to take shape. They finished the chores. Garrett led them back toward the house. The night was cold, stars sharp in the open sky. Coyotes howled somewhere far beyond the back pasture. At the porch, the sisters paused. Isabel looked him directly in the eyes. "We will not cause trouble," she promised. "I know," Garrett said. "Sleep. Doors stay locked. No one will bother you here." Isabel gave a single nod before entering. Serena followed with quick steps. Marisol lingered a moment, giving Garrett a look that said she would be watching him just as closely as he watched over them. Alma paused last. "Good night," she whispered. "Good night," he answered. They shut the door. Garrett heard the latch fall into place. He walked to the barn, found a pile of hay near his horse, and sat down with his back against the stable post. Fatigue hit him all at once. The gunfight, the decision in town, the weight of responsibility that had grown heavier with every mile. He stared up into the dark wood beams overhead. He had 4 wives now, not by desire, not by romance, but by law and necessity. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in years, he wasn't the only one counting on him. And that alone meant he would not fail. Not again. Morning came fast. Garrett barely slept in the barn, his back hurting from the packed hay and his mind refusing to rest. He got up before the sun, as he always did, feeding the horses and checking the pasture fence line nearest the house. The air was cold enough that mist came from his mouth, and every crunch of dry grass under his boots reminded him that today would not be simple. He had to figure out how 4 strangers fit into a life he'd built for one. Inside the house, the sisters woke slowly. Garrett stood near the porch as they stepped out into the early gray light one by one. Their hair was tangled from restless sleep, and their dresses were still torn, exposing shoulders and cleavage they tried hard to hide with crossed arms or pulled fabric. Clearly, they didn't feel comfortable wearing them in front of a man, especially one now called their husband by law. He noticed how Isabel positioned herself in front of the others, responsible, protective, not giving up leadership even though they were on unfamiliar ground. Serena looked tired, like nightmares had chased her through the night. Marisol was trying to appear confident, but kept glancing toward the road, as if expecting trouble. Alma stuck close to Serena, flinching at every burr call. Garrett understood what viewers might wonder. Would they sleep permanently? Would they ever feel safe sharing a roof with him? How would he earn their trust? How would they rebuild normal life after such trauma? All those questions sat heavy in Garrett's head, too. He cleared his throat. "We'll head into town. Buy clothes that fit. Supplies for the house." He paused, then added, "And food. A lot more than I got right now." Isabel looked at him carefully. "We have no money." Garrett nodded once. "I do." Marisol folded her arms. "You don't have to spend. I said I would take responsibility." Garrett cut in, voice calm but final. "I meant it." The sisters exchanged looks, not anger, not gratitude either, the kind of cautious acceptance people show when they want to believe something good but aren't ready yet. Before riding out, Garrett went to the small side shed and pulled out a trunk covered in dust. Inside were clothes that once belonged to his sister. Women's shirts, shawls, skirts mostly intact. He had kept them all these years, unable to throw them out after the day she died from an illness he couldn't stop. It was a memory that usually tore him apart, but today it was a chance to help someone else. "These belong to my sister," he said quietly. "You can wear what fits until we get better." The sisters froze, surprised by the sudden glimpse into Garrett's private life. Isabel touched one of the skirts gently, careful not to damage the memory stitched into it. She nodded with a seriousness that acknowledged the weight of the gesture. "We will take care of them," she promised. Garrett didn't respond. Words would only make it harder. Once the sisters changed into what fit them best, covering their bodies properly now, they mounted the horses. Alma rode with new confidence, sitting straighter because she no longer had a fighter dress. Marisol muttered something about finding the judge herself if he dared come near them again. Serena held Isabel's hand while they waited for Garrett to lead. The ride into town took less than half an hour. At first glance, everything looked as usual. Dust moving over the street, a wagon rolling by, the smell of coffee drifting from the saloon. But the moment Garrett and the sisters appeared, the atmosphere changed. People stared openly. 2 men near the general store elbowed each other and laughed quietly, eyes following the women in a way that made Serena shrink again. Garrett took a half-step closer, his presence shifting into a protective stance without him even thinking about it. "Ignore them," he said. "We're used to stares," Isabel replied. "Just not like this." Inside the general store, the clerk's eyebrows raised when he saw Garrett surrounded by women who were now, on paper, his wives. "Didn't waste time, did you?" the man said with a smirk. Garrett didn't smile. Clothes, he said. Decent ones. The clerk's expression sobered enough to avoid a fight. He fetched what they needed. Dresses durable enough for hard life, boots without holes, shawls for warmth. Isabel carefully chose modest items for each sister. Alma held on to new shoes like she owned something real for the first time. Garrett paid without hesitation, though the total left a heavy gap in the pouch he carried. A sacrifice he didn't regret. As they stepped back outside, a rider approached fast, dust trailing behind his horse. The horse stopped hard near them, and the rider dismounted before his boots fully hit the ground. He wore a fine coat and polished boots that didn't belong in dust towns. A ring on his finger glinted in the sun. His mustache was trimmed perfect. He looked like money and trouble. "Garrett Holt?" the man asked loudly. Garrett placed a subtle hand near the butt of his pistol. "Who's asking?" The stranger smiled with the confidence of someone used to getting whatever he demanded. "I represent Judge Howell of Arroyo Ford. Those women you're dragging around," his voice sharpened. "They were purchased. The judge does not take kindly to thieves." The sisters flinched, pressing closer together behind Garrett, as if his back was the only shield they trusted right now. Garrett didn't move. His voice stayed low, steady, unshakable. "They are under my protection. Law says they are my wives now." The man's eyes narrowed. "The judge will challenge that. And if he takes them back, there won't be a second rescue." Garrett stepped forward until the man had to tilt his head up slightly to keep eye contact. "I don't walk away," Garrett said. "Not anymore." The messenger studied him, trying to decide if Garrett Holt was the kind of man who backed down when threatened. What he saw convinced him otherwise. "I'll deliver the message," he muttered. Then he mounted his horse and rode out of town. The sisters turned to Garrett, four sets of fearful eyes waiting for a promise he couldn't speak lightly. Isabel asked the question first. "He is coming, isn't he?" Garrett looked toward the horizon. The messenger disappeared into. "He'll try." He turned back to the women, his voice firm. "But I'm not going to let him take you." There was a long moment where the sisters just stared at him, not fully reassured, not fully hopeless, just holding on to the one truth they could count on. Garrett Holt had chosen them, whether he liked it or not. He was their only defense against the man who once claimed to own them. Tonight, they would return to the ranch with new clothes. Tomorrow, they would prepare for a fight they didn't ask for. And Garrett would find out whether he was strong enough to keep all four safe, or if his past failures were about to repeat themselves. By the time they returned to the ranch, the sun was high and the heat made the air shimmer above the ground. The ride back from town felt heavier than the ride there. They had clothes now, food, the beginnings of a home, but also a warning: the judge would come for them. Garrett helped the sisters down from their horses. He didn't reach for their hands unless they needed balance. He made sure each woman stepped onto the ground steady and safe before moving to the next. Isabel noticed those small details. So did Serena, who kept glancing at Garrett like she was trying to understand what kind of man took on a burden that wasn't his. Inside, they changed into their new dresses, simple cotton with high collars and long sleeves, nothing fancy, but enough to help them feel like they had dignity again. When the sisters came out, they stood straighter, shoulders squared, as if clothing alone gave them a little piece of themselves back. Garrett looked at the cracked walls and empty shells of his home and understood something the listeners might have been wondering. How will 5 people live in a house built barely for one? Where will trust come from? What rules will guide their lives together? He didn't have every answer, but he had a start. "There's work to do," he said. "You're welcome to rest if you want, but routine helps. Keeps the mind from running too wild." Isabel nodded. "We work. We are not fragile." Marisol smirked. "Speak for yourself," she muttered, then added with a shrug. "But yes, we can work." Serena stayed quiet, still trying to feel safe in her skin. Alma stood closest to Garrett again, like he was an anchor in unfamiliar waters. Garrett assigned tasks with calm clarity, not ordering, not demanding. Isabel would help him sort the pantry and start a list of what they still needed. Marisol would check the barn and help repair tools. Serena would wash clothes and scrub dust from the floorboards. Alma would gather eggs and help in the kitchen. They scattered to their duties. For a moment, The place felt almost normal. Garrett fixed the corral gate first, hammering nails into wood while Isabel stood nearby, making inventory, folding her sleeves to work more easily. She was strong, capable, but every loud sound made her shoulders tense. Garrett noticed, and slowed his hammer swings just enough. She eventually asked the question hiding behind her silence. Why did you come upon us? You were not heading toward any settlement. Garrett didn't pause the hammer, checking fence lines, keeping rustlers away. He hesitated before adding, and staying busy keeps memories quiet. Isabel understood more than he expected. Bad ones. He didn't look at her. Enough to fill a book. For the first time, Isabel gave him a small, honest look. Not fear, not calculation, but something close to empathy. Meanwhile, behind the house, Alma discovered chickens for the first time in her life. Her laughter, brief but real, traveled across the yard. Serena scrubbed the floor by the doorway, glancing out every few minutes to make sure the others were still there. Marisol appeared carrying a toolbox, already arguing with herself about how a hammer should be used, but she smiled when Alma's laughter reached her. For a little while, danger felt farther away. When the sun dipped lower, Garrett gathered them near the front porch. He had something important to address, something any listener would be asking. What kind of marriage is this? What are the boundaries? What do the sisters owe? Garrett stood with his hat in his hands, so they knew he meant every word. I won't force anything, he said. You owe me nothing. Not your bodies. Not your affection. The law says we're married, but that don't change what I expect. Isabel blinked with surprise, and Serena's breath eased. Alma's eyes softened. Marisol crossed her arms, uncomfortable with the vulnerability she suddenly felt. Garrett continued, Trust will take time. You can take all the time you need. I don't ask you to love me. Just let me protect you until you can protect yourselves. Silence followed, heavy, emotional, necessary. Finally, Serena whispered, We will try. And that was enough. As evening settled, Garrett made supper. Beans, cornbread, simple but warm. The sisters ate quietly, still learning how to exist without fear watching every movement. Afterward, Alma stepped outside while the others cleaned up. She watched the sky turn from blue to orange to deep violet. Her voice was small when she spoke. I haven't seen a sunset without chains in years. Garrett stood beside her, hands on his belt buckle, eyes fixed on the horizon. You'll see a lot more here, he said. She looked up at him, and for a second, hope lit her face. A kind of innocent trust that had been stolen from her long ago. But the moment didn't last. Hoofbeats thudded in the distance, fast, numerous. Marisol stepped out of the house, hand instinctively reaching for a weapon she didn't have. Serena grabbed Alma and pulled her close. Isabel moved in front of them all. Garrett grabbed his rifle. Dust rose on the road. For riders. No 6. Heading straight toward the ranch. Alma's voice trembled. Is it the judge? Garrett stepped forward, jaw tight. Inside, he ordered, Now! The sisters obeyed without argument, fear returning with explosive force. Garrett stood alone in the yard, eyes narrowed at the oncoming figures, ready to face whatever came next. He had promised to protect them. Now he would have to prove it. Garrett didn't move as the riders closed in, dust swirling around them. He held his rifle in front of him, stance steady, ready but not reckless. Inside the house, the sisters peeked through the window, breaths held tight in their chests, hoping the judge hadn't arrived to drag them away before they'd even found a night of peace. The riders slowed. Horses snorted, kicking up dust and sweat into the evening air. Garrett recognized the man leading them, Sheriff Calder. Behind him came 3 ranch hands Garrett had seen in town before, and 2 strangers wearing travel coats. Calder raised his hand. Stand down, Holt. We aren't here for trouble. Garrett kept the rifle aimed low, not away. Then why bring 5 men and ride fast toward my home? Calder slid off his horse with a grunt and brushed dust from his vest. I need a word about your new household. Garrett waited. Calder stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Garrett heard. There's talk in town. Folks claiming those women were bought legal. If they come here to take them back, I need to know which side of the line you stand on. Garrett didn't hesitate. This side. Always. Calder gave a slow nod, like he expected that answer. Good. Because the judge's men are coming soon. Not tonight, but soon. The sisters inside tensed, waiting for Garrett to react. Garrett asked, "Then what do you want?" Calder's eyes tightened. "Before any trouble kicks off, I need proof those women aren't fugitives from any territory around here. If Judge Howell claims ownership, he'll twist any missing detail into a reason to drag them away. Paperwork protects them. I need their names and where they came from." Garrett hadn't thought about that yet. The law always demanded proof. The sisters had none except their word and the bruises on their skin. "I'll get the details," Garrett said. Calder pointed a warning finger. "And be sure the story matches." Judges love catching people in contradictions. He stepped back toward his horse. "We'll talk again tomorrow, Holt. Be ready." Sheriff Calder signaled his men, and the group turned and rode off, leaving silence heavy behind them. Only when hooves faded did Garrett lower his rifle and breathe again. Inside, the sisters didn't move until Garrett called out, "It's all right. Come on out." They stepped onto the porch carefully. Serena still shook. Alma clung to her hand. Marisol tried to hide how much the scare rattled her. Isabel came straight to Garrett, chin sharp with worry. "What did he want?" she asked. Garrett considered how much to share. These women had been lied to enough. He wouldn't add to that. "He needs your history," Garrett said. "Names, where you were taken from. Anything that proves you're not criminals." Isabel swallowed. "We have no papers. Our mother died years ago. Our village was small. No records. No one to speak for us." Garrett met her gaze. "You have me now." The answer stunned them all into stillness. Marisol looked away quickly, pretending she wasn't moved. Serena blinked fast. Alma's eyes glimmered, hope flickering again. Isabel studied Garrett like she was searching for cracks in the image of a decent man, and finding none. Garrett invited them back inside, and once seated around the table, he said, "Tell me everything you're comfortable sharing. I'll write it down. We'll keep stories straight so no one twists your past into something ugly." He pulled a pencil from a drawer, a scrap of paper he'd once marked fence measurements on. He turned it over to the blank side. Isabel spoke first. She wasn't just the eldest, she was their memory, their protector. "We are the Ortega sisters," she said. "Our mother was Mexican. Our father Apache. We grew up near the border. The judge's men raided our village to take cattle. When our father resisted, they killed him. They told us our mother would work off his debt. She never returned." Garrett's pencil pressed too hard against paper. The line snapped. He retrieved a knife to sharpen it, jaw clenched with controlled anger. Serena continued, voice trembling but steady. "We were taken soon after, transported from town to town. They said someone would buy us eventually." The word "buy" hit Garrett like a fist. He kept writing dates, locations, everything they remembered. So when Calder asked questions later, every detail would match. Alma's voice wavered as she added her part. "We thought no one would ever help us. We thought we were forgotten." Garrett set the pencil down and looked at them, all four. Not anymore. In that small, plain kitchen, under a flickering lantern, something shifted. They were still afraid, still uncertain, but now they weren't alone. After the writing was finished, Garrett stood. "I'm going to reinforce the doors and windows tonight. And tomorrow, I start building a second room." Marisol raised a brow. "Why? You expect us to stay?" Garrett answered simply, "I hope you do." Marisol had no smart reply this time. Before they retired, Isabel placed a hand lightly on Garrett's arm. "Not flirtation, trust, respect. You are a strange man," she said. "Most men want only what they can take. You want only to give." "Why?" Garrett stared at the floor a moment, voice quiet when he answered. "Because I've taken enough from this world already." Isabel understood. Some wounds never show, but they change a person all the same. The sisters retreated to their room, doors locked for safety, not from Garrett anymore, but for whatever might come down the road. Garrett sat by the window with his rifle, keeping watch. Coyotes howled in the distance. The air grew colder. He didn't fight sleep. He didn't allow it. Tonight, he wasn't just a rancher, not just a man punished by his past. Tonight, Garrett Holt was exactly what four women needed. A wall between them and the nightmares outside. and as long as he breathed, that wall would stand. Garrett kept his eyes open most of the night. He sat in the wooden chair near the door, rifle upright against his knee, listening for trouble. Every creak of the walls, every brush of wind, every distant coyote call made his shoulders tense. He didn't fear attack, he expected it, but he refused to let danger reach the sisters while they slept under his roof. By dawn, fatigue pulled at the edges of his thoughts, but he forced himself up and outside. The cold morning air bit into his skin, waking him quickly. Sunlight stretched over the land, turning dry grass pale gold. No horse tracks in the dirt. No dust trails coming from the road. For now, the judge's men weren't here. Inside, soft footsteps moved around the kitchen. The smell of coffee seeped through the house. When Garrett entered, he found Isabel boiling water at the stove, Serena arranging tin cups, Marisol sharpening a knife on a stone she'd found outside, and Alma trying her best to fold the remaining blankets stronger and neater than yesterday. Their movements looked more confident, more like they belonged. Garrett rubbed a hand across his jaw. "You don't need to do all that." Isabel looked over her shoulder. "We want to," she said, voice calm and certain. "This is our home now, too. We must take care of it." That word, home, hit Garrett harder than any bullet he'd taken in the war. He nodded silently, not trusting his voice. After they ate, Garrett stood by the table and addressed questions the listeners might still have. Where would they sleep long term? What would life look like here? How would they build a future, not just hide from danger? Asterisk, asterisk. "I'll add a new room onto the house," he said. "A place for all of you to sleep comfortably. The barn worked for me, but it isn't right for you." Marisol raised an eyebrow. "You slept out there, so we could have a bed." Garrett shrugged slightly. "I'm used to the barn." That wasn't the full truth. He slept there so they wouldn't have to fear him. But he didn't say that part. Serena spoke quietly. "We trust you more today than yesterday." It was the closest thing to gratitude she'd said. Garrett accepted it with a small nod. They spent the morning working together. Garrett showed them how to cut boards for framing, and the sound of hammering filled the yard. Serena helped hold wood steady with shaking hands at first, but the longer she worked beside Garrett, the steadier she became. Marisol teased him about crooked nails until he challenged her to do better, which she did, grinning with satisfaction. Alma carried lightweight planks and fetch nails, proud to be useful. Isabel measured carefully, ensuring every piece fit tight. Trust wasn't suddenly perfect, but it was growing, one nail, one breath, one shared goal at a time. While they worked, they talked. Garrett asked more about their past. Not to reopen wounds, but to fill in missing details the sheriff might question later. Isabel explained that their father had taught them some Spanish and English, so they could trade in border towns. Serena loved tending animals, especially goats back home. Marisol admitted she once punched a soldier for calling her mother a name no woman deserved. Alma confessed she feared loud noises because one-night raiders came without warning, and since then, silence or noise could both feel dangerous. Garrett answered their questions too. He told them that he had a sister, Maria, whose dresses they wore now. Maria had died young, too young, and Garrett had carried guilt ever since, believing he could have helped but failed. He said little more, but the sisters understood. Loss was not something only they carried. The day warmed. Sweat built on skin and tools heated in the sun. When Garrett paused for water, he noticed Alma watching him again. She looked away quickly, cheeks pink, but she didn't hide the way safety had settled into her shoulders when he stood close. Later, during a break, the sisters sat under the porch shade while Garrett repaired the barn latch. Alma walked over, holding a dry biscuit. She offered it with shy courage. "For you," she said. Garrett took it gently. "Thank you." For a moment, they just stood there, not needing words. Alma gave a tiny smile before running back to the others, proud of the step she had taken. Work continued until afternoon. The new room frame was upright, strong and straight, a symbol of permanence. Garrett wiped his forehead with his sleeve, breathing deep. Suddenly, Isabel's voice sharpened. Dust on the road. Garrett turned fast. A thin cloud rising from the direction of town. Riders again. The sisters stiffened, eyes wide, hearts pounding through the quiet. Garrett steadied his rifle, but kept it lowered. Soon the riders were close enough to recognize Sheriff Calder and two deputies. Not an enemy team, but not exactly welcome visitors either. Calder stopped his horse and dismounted. He looked around the property, impressed despite himself. "You work fast." Garrett stepped forward. "You here for the statements?" Calder nodded. "Better sooner than later. The judge's men have been asking questions in Arroyo Ford. They're moving this way." Fear crept into Alma's grip as she held Isabel's arm. Serena stared at the horizon like danger might form any second. Marisol reached for the knife she'd been sharpening earlier, ready to protect what little freedom she had regained. Calder noticed the sisters' fear and addressed them directly, softer than his usual voice. "I'm no enemy. If your story matches, I'll defend your right to remain here." Isabel spoke first. She told the story clearly, calm but full of truth that a lie could never imitate. Serena added details, places, names. Marisol spoke boldly. Alma, though nervous, confirmed what she could, clinging to Isabel's guiding hand. The statements matched perfectly. Calder wrote it all down, nodding as he worked. "Good. If the judge tries to claim otherwise, he'll have to fight me in the county court." Hope flickered. Not a guarantee, but a chance. Before leaving, Calder pulled Garrett aside. "Be prepared," he warned quietly. "Judge Howell is a cruel man. He doesn't lose what he paid for without blood. Fortify your property. Keep your rifle close." Garrett met the sheriff's gaze without fear. "I intend to." Calder mounted his horse and rode off again, leaving dust and silence behind. Isabel stepped to Garrett's side. "He will come," she said. "Yes," Garrett replied. "But he won't win." The sisters watched him, searching for cracks, doubts, fear, but they found none. Garrett wasn't fearless. He was determined. There was a difference, and that difference mattered. As evening settled, the new room's foundation stood firm. The sisters changed into fresh clothing again, and Garrett cooked another simple supper. They sat together at the table, no longer separated by silence or mistrust. The house felt fuller, warmer, like a family taking shape, even if none of them dared speak the word aloud. After dinner, Marisol surprised everyone by asking, "Are there horses we can learn to ride better? If the worst happens, we should be able to run or fight, not hide." Garrett looked at her, then nodded. "I'll teach you. All of you." Isabel nodded firmly. "We will learn anything you teach. We will not be helpless again." Garrett admired their resolve, their strength rising through fear. "You're not helpless. Not anymore." Later, while the sisters settled in their room, Garrett sat by the window again with his rifle, watching the road under moonlight. He replayed every detail of the day, how they worked together, how trust had taken a breath of life, how danger drew nearer with every passing hour. But he also remembered Isabel's steady voice, Serena's courage returning, Marisol's fire becoming purpose, and Alma's shy biscuit offering, tiny victories that meant everything. Garrett Holt had no illusions. This wasn't a peaceful story yet, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't fighting alone. And whoever came to take these women away would learn that home, even a newly built one, is a battlefield a good man refuses to lose. The night after Sheriff Calder's visit settled heavy and tense over the ranch, but morning arrived crisp and bright, pretending the world wasn't about to turn dangerous. Garrett stepped outside before sunrise, stretching sore muscles and breathing in cold air that carried the scent of wood smoke and dry grass. It reminded him of quiet mornings before life got complicated, before he took responsibility for 4 women who trusted him to keep them alive. He checked the new room structure first, running his calloused fingers along the beams to make sure the frame hadn't shifted in the night. It needed a roof soon, walls, a door that locked stronger than the flimsy latch on their current room. He made a silent promise to finish it before the judge's men arrived. Inside the house, he heard dishes clinking and faint voices. Alma's laughter, soft and uncertain, mixed with Marisol's playful irritation. Serena humming under her breath. Isabel giving instructions, steady as always. They were finding a rhythm, a way to breathe again. When Garrett stepped in, he found breakfast already cooking. Isabel stood at the stove, sleeves rolled, stirring eggs while Serena sliced bread. Alma arranged cups carefully like each placement mattered. Marisol leaned against the table, staring outside, always guarding even when pretending not to. Garrett rubbed a hand across his jaw. You didn't have to. Yes, we did. Isabel interrupted gently, not turning from the stove. We need purpose. We can't sit and wait for fear. She set the pan down and finally looked at him. There was exhaustion in her eyes, but also strength, a determination that didn't exist when he first met her. He respected that. They ate together quietly. No one rushed. It wasn't a feast, but it felt like more than survival. It felt like life beginning again. Garrett noticed the way Serena's shoulders didn't shake anymore, and how Marisol smirked when he burned his tongue on hot coffee. Alma met his gaze once, only once, but lasted long enough to show gratitude hidden behind shyness. After breakfast, Garrett stood from the table and faced them all. Today we practice riding and shooting. If trouble comes, I want you prepared. This answered another question listeners might wonder. Would the sisters learn to defend themselves? Would Garrett arm them? Asterisk, asterisk. The answer was yes. Completely yes. Marisol grinned, excitement replacing fear. Serena swallowed, nervously but nodded. Isabel squared her stance like she'd been waiting for this since the ambush. And Alma, she took a breath and straightened, refusing to be the weak one left behind. Garrett led them to the corral. 3 horses already saddled, the ones left by the judge's men, and his own gelding. Isabel climbed on first, adjusting herself confidently. She'd ridden before. Serena needed help, legs shaking until the horse moved, and she realized she could balance after all. Marisol climbed up like she owned the saddle, and the horse snorted at her boldness. Alma struggled at first, terrified of falling, but Garrett stood beside her, hands steadying the reins. You're stronger than you think, he said. Alma whispered, only because you're here. Those words hit deep, deeper than she knew. When they were mounted, Garrett explained how to turn, how to stop, how to control fear by breathing through motion. They practiced slow circles first. Isabel corrected her sisters, guiding with gentle touches and quick instructions. Serena loosened up as the horse walked steady beneath her. Marisol pushed her horse faster, challenging herself to handle speed. Alma clung to the reins, terrified, determined, and eventually her posture relaxed enough to trust the animal beneath her. Garrett watched them ride and felt something he hadn't felt in years: pride. Not in himself, in them. After riding, he set up bottles at the fence for shooting practice. He retrieved an old revolver and a small rifle, tools to defend life, not take it thoughtlessly. The sisters hesitated, understanding the weight of holding a weapon again. But one by one, they stepped up. Isabel first, jaw set, eyes sharp. She missed the first shot, but corrected quickly, hitting the next 2 clean. A woman who learned fast. Serena held the gun carefully as if it might explode. Garrett stood close, guiding her grip. She fired once, flinching, but hitting the post near the target. Improvement came with each breath. Marisol grabbed the revolver like she'd been waiting her whole life for someone to hand her power back. Her grin widened when she shattered a bottle on her 3rd shot. Alma stood smallest and quietest, hands shaking. Garrett crouched beside her, voice low. No rush. Only shoot when you're ready. It took a moment, but she pulled the trigger, missing entirely. She winced, embarrassed. Garrett didn't sugarcoat. Try again. She did, bottle cracked slightly. Alma gasped, sending a shy smile up at him that felt like sunrise after a long winter. By midday, sweat slicked their skin and laughter occasionally replaced silence. Progress was slow, but survival didn't require perfection, just bravery and will. But safety was temporary. Trouble didn't knock politely. As they rested near the corral, Garrett scanned the horizon. He saw what he feared: fresh dust on the distant road. Not town traffic, a group. Moving steady. Isabel followed his gaze. Them. Maybe, Garrett said quietly. We finished too late, Serena whispered, gripping her dress. No, Garrett said. We finished just in time. He ushered the sisters into the house. Alma hesitated like she didn't want to leave Garrett alone, but Isabel took her hand and pulled her inside. Garrett positioned himself near the porch, rifle ready but hidden behind a support beam. Minutes passed that felt longer than an entire day. The riders slowed before reaching the gate, stopping well back from the ranch. Their leader raised a white cloth, signaling they weren't here to attack. Yet, when they approached closer, dust cleared enough for Garrett to recognize the man in front. Judge Howell. Armed men flanked him on both sides. Polished boots, well-fed horses, guns too clean for ranch work. They belonged to money and corruption. Judge Howell smiled like a man, confident the world bowed to him. "Garrett Holt," he called out, "you have something that belongs to me." His tone alone made Garrett's grip tighten. "They don't belong to anyone," Garrett said. The judge laughed soft, cruel. "Everything belongs to someone. These women were purchased, paid for, and I always claim what is mine." Inside the house, the sisters watched, hearts pounding. Serena prayed under her breath. Alma stared at Garrett, silently begging him not to fall. Garrett stepped forward onto the porch, not hiding, not trembling. "They are under my protection," he said again, louder. "The county law recognizes the marriage." Judge Howell lifted a document from his coat. "The county won't matter when I take this to the territorial court. The law can be persuaded." He looked Garrett over like a piece of livestock he intended to buy. "You're outnumbered," Howell warned. "Step aside. Let me handle what I paid for." Garrett didn't blink, didn't break. "You'll have to kill me first." The judge laughed. "That can be arranged." But he didn't give the order. Not yet. Because something about Garrett Holt made even a corrupt man hesitate. Judge Howell leaned forward in his saddle. "I'll return with more men. More guns. When I come back, if these women are not surrendered, I will burn this ranch to the ground with everyone inside." Then he turned his horse sharply, signaling retreat. Dust swallowed them again as they disappeared down the road. But the threat stayed like a storm cloud that refused to move. Garrett lowered his gun slowly. His heart still hammered, but his face betrayed nothing. Isabel stepped onto the porch, jaw clenched. "He means what he said." "Yes," Garrett replied. Marisol emerged next, eyes blazing. "Then we do not wait. We prepare." Serena came out holding Alma close. "What if we lose?" Garrett looked at each of them, 4 lives placed in his hands, 4 futures tied to his choices. "We won't," he said, "because I have something he doesn't." They waited for his answer. Garrett Holt finally spoke the truth that defined him now. "I have a family worth fighting for." And with that, fear turned into resolve. Walls could be built, ammunition prepared, strategies formed. But the most important thing was already in place. They would not run. They would not surrender. They would stay, together, until the last gun fell silent. Garrett woke before dawn, prepared for the worst. Judge Howell's threat wasn't something he could ignore. All night he had planned every detail of their defense. Where to position rifles, how to use the barn for cover, which direction the sisters would escape only if he fell. He didn't want that plan, but he had it. Inside the house, the sisters had barely slept. They came out dressed, hair tied back, ready to stand beside him. The new room the 5 of them had built together wasn't finished yet, but its frame stood strong, a reminder of why they were fighting. Garrett looked each woman in the eyes. "No one leaves. No one gets taken. We stay together." They nodded, frightened but unbroken. Just as the sun pushed light over the hills, distant hoofbeats returned. Fast, many. Dust rose like a rising storm. Judge Howell, now with nearly a dozen armed men. The sisters hurried into position behind barrels Garrett had stacked as cover. Isabel held the rifle Garrett gave her, hands steady. Marisol gripped the revolver, jaws set and eyes sharp. Serena stayed right behind Isabel, passing bullets and watching for openings. Alma stayed close to Garrett, not to hide, but because she trusted him more than the walls. Judge Howell halted his men near the corral. "This is your last chance," he shouted. "Surrender the women, and I'll let you live." Garrett stepped forward, no tremble, no fear. "They're not yours to take. They never were." Howell lifted his hand as signal. But a rifle shot cracked first. Not from Garrett, not from the ranch, from the ridge above. Sheriff Calder and 3 deputies rode hard down the slope, rifles raised. Territorial law stands. Calder shouted, "You trespass here, Howell. You leave now or face arrest and armed resistance." Howell spun in shock. This man stole property from a court order. Calder held up the signed witness statements. These women were kidnapped. They belong to no one. Holt isn't a thief. He's the only one following real law here. Howell's men hesitated. Payment wasn't worth dying for. Garrett raised his rifle slowly. "There's enough land and air in this territory for you to disappear into. Do it now." Judge Howell's jaw clenched with unbearable fury. But even a powerful man knew when he was outmatched. He yanked his reins and spat into the dirt. "This isn't over," he growled. But Garrett stepped closer, voice harder than gun steel. "Yes, it is." The judge saw the truth in Garrett's eyes. He turned his horse and rode off fast. His men followed, dust blowing behind them like retreating shame. Silence fell, long, heavy, unbelievable. Then Isabel lowered her rifle first, breath breaking loose from her chest. Serena dropped into a seat on the porch. Crying from relief, she couldn't hide anymore. Marisol exhaled a curse and leaned against a beam, wiping sweat from her brow. Alma turned to Garrett and threw her arms around him before realizing what she'd done, but he didn't pull away. Calder rode closer, tipping his hat. "Paperwork's official. You're all protected. If Howell tries anything again, he'll find bars waiting for him." For the first time since they arrived, all 4 sisters truly relaxed, tension melting from their shoulders. Inside the yard, Garrett finally allowed himself to breathe. Everything he'd promised, he delivered. He faced the women carefully, knowing relationships needed clarity now that danger had passed. "I don't expect anything you're not comfortable giving," he said. "This home is yours as long as you want it. You can stay here with me, only if it's your choice." Isabel stepped closer, her gaze softening into something new. Admiration, trust, something unspoken that didn't need naming. "We choose to stay," she said. "Not because the law says so, because you gave us our lives back." Garrett nodded. "Once, because too many words might break the moment." The sisters moved inside, laughing lightly for the first time. Alma squeezed Garrett's hand before going. Marisol said he still needed to fix the fence. Serena thanked him quietly. Isabel lingered a second longer, eyes promising a future they didn't need to rush toward. Garrett watched them. 4 women who had survived hell and still stood strong. His family, his reason to stay. He looked toward the half-finished room, toward the rising sun, toward the stretch of land ahead. A ranch built for 1 now belonged to 5. And for the first time in his life, Garrett Holt wasn't alone. He was exactly where he was meant to be.